Hello, this is Robert Rickover. I'm an Alexander Technique teacher in Omaha, Nebraska. My guest today is Imogen Ragone, who's an Alexander Technique teacher in Wilmington, Delaware. I think we both have in common that we teach mainly online these days. And I wanted to talk with Imogen about something from the early teaching career, let's say, of F. Matthias Alexander, the founder of the Alexander Technique. And Imogen, I'm sure you've seen the reference that when he got to England and started work, when he moved from Australia to England and started working with people in London, he acquired a nickname, which was the Breathing Man. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, no, it does, but for some reason I thought that was in Australia, not in England. But anyway,
well, maybe
or maybe it was a bit of both. I don't.
Who knows? But anyway, he acquired that name, presumably because when people worked with him, they noticed their breathing got a lot better. And I was thinking about that the other day, and I thought to myself, he could have been nicknamed the Torso Man. In that, well, in that breathing is a major thing that goes on in our torso. I mean, it is at least half of our torso, something like half our torso, is directly devoted to breathing and oxygen exchange and stuff. The ribs, the lungs, and maybe most important of all, the diaphragm, which is this huge muscle that kind of cuts right across the center of our torso. And that even the parts of our torso that aren't directly related to breathing affect it pretty dramatically and are affected by it. So when you're taking air, when you're creating a vacuum and air is coming in, it's because your diaphragm is pressing down on what's below, which is all the digestive stuff, right? And how that stuff responds to that pressing down affects your breathing and vice versa. So this is just a very simple thought. It's a super short conversation, but that if he could have been called the Torso Man, it does suggest that he was interested in the torso as something that maybe could be changed, which is not how most Alexander teachers, I think about the torso. There's the head, there's the torso. Head moves away from the torso or whatever direction someone's using. There's not too much thought about rearranging the torso itself, except for John Doe Macerero, who talks about it incessantly as being what Alexander was interested in the early days of his work. And he's built a whole way of thinking about the technique on that, which he calls initial Alexander technique. So that's it. That's all I got to say. You want to add something to it?
I'm just thinking, it's just given me a little bit of food for thought. I'm not sure I completely agree that Alexander teachers think of the torso as something that can't be changed, because but that's coming especially back to the breathing and how that whole mechanism changes, and that's
right.
So, but I know but I do sort of know what you mean, that when you say torso, you think of that as a thing.
Yes.
In itself, although I do think of head spine rather than head torso for that anyway. Food for thought, and Torso Man does have a sort of ring to it.
It has a ring to it. And I think what John Doe's talking about a lot is Alexander had specific ideas of how to rearrange your torso.
Mm.
And that isn't really part of most Alexander teaching that I've ever.
Yeah, for me, any changes that come about in the torso would be indirect. It wouldn't be a
And
specific
exactly.
rearrangement.
And he
Yeah.
proposes some very direct
Mhm.
rearrangements of antagonistic pulls and the like. Anyway,
Mhm.
so
Interesting.
that's that. That will. You think that takes care of this conversation?
Sure.
Okay,
I never know what's coming. Thank you, Robert.
So my guest today has been Imogen Ragone, an Alexander teacher in Wilmington, Delaware, and I'll put a link to her website and a link to a site about the Alexander technique in general by this interview. Thanks so much, Imogen.
You're welcome.